Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Mindfulness for Performance Under Pressure digital event hosted by the CMI South East Board. My name is Mel, and I'm an event delivery coordinator at CMI, and I'll shortly be handing over to Steve to begin this evening's event. If you have any questions during the digital event, you can ask them using the live chat box on the right of your screen, and we shall answer as many as we can during the Q&A. Today's session is being recorded, and it will be shared with you tomorrow for those who have booked to attend. The event recording will also be available on the CMI website and CMI YouTube channel. Now over to Stephen Duncan, former Deputy Chair of the CMI South East Board, to begin tonight's event.
Thank you very much, Mel, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. As a career aviator and performance coach, working with people from across defence aviation and in the international sporting realm, I was really interested to listen to Sarah's talk that she delivered at one of the stations on this subject of mindfulness, as it is not something that is routinely equated or lined up with high performance. However, what she said I thought was so powerful and resonated so well, not just with me, but with a number of my colleagues. I was really keen to get her involved with tonight's event. So Sarah is an experienced military combat helicopter pilot who has completed a number of operational tours throughout her career, finishing off working within the Military Aviation Authority, where she was a human factors facilitator amongst the other courses that she ran, and is now left to run her own business management coaching consultancy called Well Be It. So Sarah, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Steve, for having me along. Great introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant to have you. So this talk has been particularly popular, seems to have resonated with a lot of people. And really, I'd kind of like to start you off with one of the questions that we've already received. So from Carmen, because it seems to fit in. And she asks, how does mindfulness really work when you're constantly under fire for no reason? So, how did you, as a military combat helicopter pilot, get into mindfulness?
Yeah, great question. I get asked this a lot, actually, and people kind of want to know, what's this link between military and mindfulness? And so I've actually got a bit of a story that I can tell you, because every helicopter pilot loves to tell a story. Are you up for hearing a little story?
Oh yes, where's the watch?
I think we might have some slides that I can talk to. So if you hopefully we're going to see a video come up in a second. There we go. Hopefully we're going to press play. So this was me in my Puma helicopter flying down this valley in Morocco, and I remember it, you can't really see it, it doesn't do it justice, but the valley was incredibly kind of twisting and turning, and I remember there was this mountain pass that cars would drive down, and it was very windy, and I remember making some comment like, well, if a car can get round it, so can a helicopter. And it was, there was a lot of twisting and turning, and I was just reflecting at this moment how much I was enjoying myself, and then the next thing that happens is just this kind of smash. And the next thing is my canopy just shatters. And I've got a slide as well, if we can go onto that one. So the canopy just absolutely shattered, and the cockpit got very, very noisy all of a sudden. And we had just hit high tension electricity cables that were strung across the valley that we hadn't seen, and they weren't marked on the map. And I remember thinking at this point, so this is how I'm going to die. And feeling quite pleased, actually, that it was all going to be over quite quickly. And then the next thing, I'll never forget it, the next thing that happened was in the left-hand side of the picture, you can see there's a guy there called Peeves. I don't know if he's listening today, but he was in the left-hand seat, sat next to me. And he shouted these 4 words. He said, "Fly the aircraft, Sarah." And just like that, I was back in the cockpit, you know, and I'd stopped musing about how I was going to die. And I was like, oh my goodness, the aircraft is still flying. And then I kind of went straight into my training, did my emergency handling drills. I was working with the crewmen down the back to find a field to land in, and Peeps did the radio call and the checks and things like that. And we worked really well together as a crew, as we've been trained to do. And it wasn't until we landed and I'd shut the aircraft down, we've got another picture coming up here, shut the aircraft down, that was the first time my thoughts then returned to, oh my God, what's just happened? You know, we nearly died, kind of thing. I think Kenny, who's pictured there, is also on tonight. I don't know if you can introduce yourself and say hello, Kenny. That was what we trained for all the time, was to be able to handle a badly damaged aircraft and not to be distracted by, you know, thinking about other things. And we were always taught, fly the aircraft first, fly the aircraft first. And I didn't really discover mindfulness till some years later, in my own kind of personal journey, where I was, you know, looking for ways to improve my performance and my mental well-being. And I was so impressed by it that I started coaching it. And then I realized that for the last 20 years, I had actually been practicing mindfulness. I just hadn't called it that, because in that moment when I'd hit those wires, my attention needed to be on flying the aircraft, not thinking about my eulogy or my funeral. And we've been taught that. We've been taught to unitask. And that's what mindfulness is. It's about having your focus in one place and choosing where you want to have your focus, and making sure that it's in a place that is most helpful to you and not being distracted by something that isn't serving you. So that was a real light bulb moment for me, where I realized that, well, if I can practice mindfulness in the helicopter, so can everyone else. Everyone else can practice mindfulness in their business, in their day-to-day stuff. It doesn't have to be this thing where you go off to some Buddhist retreat for 5 years. I mean, if you've got time, great, but most of us don't. And actually, mindfulness is much more accessible than we think. So that became my passion, was to be able to teach people how to practice mindfulness in their everyday activities, and also extreme activities like, you know, flying a helicopter on fire.
Fantastic, really interesting story, some good pictures. Have they let you stop paying for it yet?
They were amazingly good about it. I remember as well, because we were in Morocco, and all these Moroccan kids sort of came around and were looking at our helicopter, and we started talking about football, because that's the universal language that, you know, always talk about football. And they were saying, yeah, we've got a great match on tonight. And I said, oh, good, are you going to be watching? They went, no, not now, because the power's gone out. Like, oh, I'm really sorry about that.
Yeah. Oh, bless. Yeah. So, you know, I think, as you say there, you know, a really powerful example, and going back to the question from Carmen, if you can do it when you're in a noisy helicopter, aircraft, then you can kind of do it anywhere. So I'd just like to touch on this concept of unitasking that you brought up, because you know, we're consistently bombarded with this idea that we've got to be doing more, and we've got to be doing different things, and we've got to be multitasking. And I'm sure I can't be the only one who goes home at the end of a working day and thinks, what have I actually achieved today?
Yeah, absolutely. Very honest. So, and you're right. So we're in this age where we're constantly being distracted. Attention is the most valuable commodity, that, you know, your phone is constantly trying to, you know, grab your attention. And actually, it's the opposite of mindfulness, because mindfulness is about choosing where your attention is and not having it dragged off somewhere. And because we're busy, we have this idea, this false idea really, that if we can do lots of things at once, we'll be more efficient. But there's actually a lot of science to back up, unfortunately, that our performance goes down by about 40%. So if that was, you know, writing an email, you'd have more typos in it, or, you know, you wouldn't write the prose as well, or you wouldn't make such a convincing argument, you know. And if you're flying an aircraft, that could be the difference between, you know, flying into a hill. So your performance goes down when you multitask, because your brain is not designed to do it, and it actually tries to split itself into two. And what it does is it just goes very, very quickly in between the two tasks. And that takes up a, you know, cognitive capacity, so something's got to give. So your performance gives. And the other thing is it takes time. Even though your brain is, amazing, it takes time to switch between the two. So you take longer to do it. And they reckon it amounts to about 2 hours a day, people that routinely multitask, which is most of us, let's be honest. We probably spend 2 hours longer doing what we were doing because we multitask. So there's this great illusion that we achieve more by multitasking, and actually the opposite is true. So if we want to achieve, the best performance we can, we need to focus on one thing at one time, and that does a couple of things. A, it increases our performance, and B, our brain likes it. It's good for our brain to do that, and you're actually practicing mindfulness. So you're getting a 2-for-1 benefit just by unitasking.
Hey, so just for the audience, so what you're saying there is that mindfulness is not necessarily developing yourself into Buddha, like myself, and having to go and sit in a corner and contemplate things. It can be how you approach the work that you're doing and the output that you're after.
Absolutely. And I think you make a very good Buddha, by the way. But that's not to be dismissive about meditation, because meditation is kind of like your gym session. So if you want to get fit, you can climb stairs rather than taking the escalator, and eat a healthy diet. And when you go to the gym, that's your dedicated session. So there is time, and there's a time and a place to meditate, but that is not the only way to be mindful. And there are lots of things that you can do mindfully, both at work and at home, and you're getting that extra benefit. So why wouldn't you?
Yeah. So it kind of ties in. We've got a question here from Joan, who wants to know, how do you prioritize mindfulness when conflicting operational pressures place demands on your time?
Yeah, so it's one of those sort of paradoxes that the more you need mindfulness in your life, often the less time you make for it. I think there's a classic phrase that someone says, I don't have time to meditate for 10 minutes a day. And the answer is, well, then you have to meditate for 20 minutes a day, which is an infuriating response for anyone who feels like they don't have 10 minutes. But the answer is you just make the choice. Nobody can tell you what to do with your time. You need to decide whether or not you buy into mindfulness. I think it will increase your performance, and you will actually achieve more by doing less. But ultimately, it's down to you how you prioritize your time. And that's a battle that we all have, isn't it? That's what makes life so interesting.
Yeah. And I'm just seeing up in the comments, so I'd like to say as well, good evening to Andy Peebles, who is in Hong
Yay!
Kong, and Kenny Wickens, who compliments you on your pictures.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Hi, Kenny. And Peeps has signed in from Singapore as well, so well done. Thank you for joining us tonight. I don't know what time it is over there, but that's amazing.
Yeah, so there's a comment here from Pamela Hudson. I've had a career of multitasking over the last 20 years in a busy control room, and now it's hard to be mindful.
Yeah, absolutely, Pamela. It's so true. And thank you for sharing that, because I'm sure a lot of people will feel the same. And that's a learnt behavior. Our brains are lazy and they want to do what they've always done. So if we've trained our brains to multitask, our brains don't really want to change, and we'll be resistant to it as well, because we don't really like changing. We don't, the primitive part of our brain fears change, because if it's a novel situation, it doesn't know how it's going to go. So it's very normal to consciously or subconsciously resist mindfulness, because it takes effort. You are deciding where to focus your attention, and that takes effort. But what I will say is, because of this wonderful thing called neuroplasticity, once you start training your brain to be mindful, and I'll tell you exactly what that is in a minute. So when we leave this session, you'll know what it is to be mindful. But when you start that training, you're starting to build new neural pathways. And every time you do that, you're strengthening those neural pathways. And it will get easier with time. It will take time. You have to make a commitment to it, but you will be able to do it. You just have to make that commitment.
So that kind of brings us on to the question of, What do you mean by being mindful, and how can we become more mindful?
Well, exactly. Okay, so I'm glad you asked, Steve, because I'm desperate to get you to meditate on YouTube Live. So we're going to do a mindfulness exercise, but let me just explain what it is before we do it. I see it as two sort of sides of a coin. You've got focus. Where is my attention? Where do I want my attention to be? I'm going to focus my attention on flying an aircraft. And then you've got awareness. Where has my attention gone? I was thinking about my eulogy. I was thinking about my funeral. I was thinking about, the doorbell ringing. So you've got focus. This is where my attention is. And then awareness of where did my attention go? And then every time you notice where your attention has gone, you're being mindful. And that's awareness. And every time you bring your attention back to where you want it to be, you're focusing and you're being mindful. So it's this sort of dance between where is my attention gone? Where do I want it to be? And that is a mental sit-up. That's what Ruby Wax calls it, a mental sit-up. And every time you do that kind of, where's it gone? Where do I want it to be? You're strengthening your mindfulness muscles. And the benefit of that is that when you really need it, when you're under pressure, having your attention exactly where you want it to be will have been trained into you because you've trained your brain to do it. So that's mindfulness. What I'd like to do is we're just going to do a minute of mindful breathing. So when we do that, all we're going to do is focus on our in-breath and our out-breath. There's nothing special you have to do. You don't have to moderate your breathing. There's no right or wrong way to do it. But I just want you to focus your attention on your breath. And as you breathe in, count 1, and then the next time 2, 3, and keep counting up as high as you can go. But every time you notice that your attention has gone from something other than your breathing, just notice it and then bring it back to your breathing, but start your counting again at 1. Okay, so we're going to do that now. Are you up for it?
Yeah, I mean, public maths is never a good thing, but yeah.
You can count inwardly. I'm going to count inwardly, okay? But I'm going to close my eyes and meditate on camera and look like an idiot. So if everyone can join me, that would be great. Okay, so closing my eyes. Breathing in, focusing on that in-breath. Breathing out, focusing on the in-breath. In, notice where the breath expands in your chest. Out, notice the air leaving your mouth. I'm just going to give you some time to practice that, just focusing on your breath, nothing else to do, and just counting each breath as you go. Anytime you get distracted, not a problem. That's what brains do. Just start your counting again and bring your attention back to your breath. And when you're ready, if you close your eyes, you can open your eyes, but you can now take your focus away from your breath. Come back into the room. So I don't know if people are feeling brave, but if they want to share, how high did you get? How many breaths did you get before you noticed you were distracted and then started again? What were people's numbers? I don't know if you can share those results.
Yeah, I've got a 16 from Mr. Jez.
Ooh, very good.
Yeah, for myself, it was just good that I'm wearing flip-flops. Yeah, all counting aids required. And we'll just give that a minute to come in. So, what did you say you called that exercise?
That's just a minute. That's just a minute of mindful breathing. So when you do this at home, what I would do, and we can do this before we finish, is just count how long, time yourself for a minute and count how many breaths you do in a minute. For me, it's 7. And then every time you want to do a minute of mindful breathing, just do 7 breaths. That's it. That's all you have to do. So that's a different exercise from the counting up and regaining your counting, because this is to show you how often you get distracted. Nothing wrong with it. It's not a competition. If you get 16, if you get 1, it doesn't matter. The point is you've noticed you've become distracted and you've brought your attention back to where you want it to be. That's one mental setup every time. So when you practice mindful breathing at home, let's say it's 7 breaths, just take 7 mindful breaths, just focusing on your breath. And every time you notice you're distracted, bring your attention back to your breath. That's it. That's mindfulness. Boom. You've done it.
Right. So within our 1 minute of breathing, we might actually achieve more than 1 mental sit-up if we have to bring ourselves back.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, I normally get to about 2 or 3 before I get distracted. So, in 1 minute, I might do 3 sit-ups.
Yeah, that's very simple way of looking at it, but this thing about, as you say, being able to focus where you want to focus, is key. And we've got a question here from Peg Milliken Schaefer. Do you have a special short phrases you say to yourself that brings your mind or attention back to the task or greatest need at hand?
Yeah, you can. Sometimes I ask myself a pivot question, which is, where is my focus right now? And then where do I want it to be? And, our focus might go to lots of different things. We might be distracted by noises. We might be distracted by other people. We might be distracted by our own thoughts. But you can just say, where is my focus? Where do I want it to be? And just ask yourself that, and then just, imagine bringing that laser beam back to where you want it to be.
Yeah. And we had a question earlier, if I can just scroll through and find it, because I think quite interesting about this mindfulness within organisations. Do you have any ideas or tips for introducing mindfulness for my team to help with their work relationship, stress, level of engagement? Because I think, as you say, while we're talking about individual focus, at an organisational level, that also applies.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And my part of my business is to help businesses employ a mindfulness culture and, have it ingrained at individual, team and cultural level. So that can look like you practice your own individual mindfulness, but you practice team mindfulness where you're mindful of each other, because it's just about having your attention where you want it. So you can have your attention on, let's say someone's talking in a meeting, and how often do we get distracted? Just giving your full attention to that person talking, that's kind of team mindfulness or mindfulness of others. And then you've got mindful working, which is focusing on one task and not trying to do 3, essentially. So there's lots of practical ways that you can be mindful in an organization. But also, to answer the question about stress as well, stress is a natural response to a certain extent. Stress keeps us alive, that feeling of being a bit anxious, or it's often signaling to us that maybe we've got more on than we feel we can deal with. So it can be a useful emotion, but ultimately it's only useful if we engage with it in the right way. And if we just allow it to fester and take over, then it starts to rule us a bit. So mindfulness allows you to, when you notice a stressful thought or that feeling of stress, you can just redirect your attention to your breath, really simply. And because of the stress response, when we feel stressed, our heart rate goes up and our breathing goes up and our muscle tension goes up. So one of the easiest ways to reduce how stressed we feel is to slow our breathing rate down. So you can just focus on your breath and then just start to exhale for longer than your inhale, which will naturally slow your breathing rate down. So you've got breath focus and then breath control, where you're actually changing how you're breathing and making it slower. And that can just help you to feel less stressed. And when you feel less stressed, you're able to make better, clearer decisions. So that's another practical way that you can use mindfulness in the workplace.
Yeah, and there's a lot of evidence there, whether you extrapolate from the Yerkes-Dodson curve or wherever you go, but that one, stress, because of the chemicals that it releases into your bloodstream, reduces your ability to think in that kind of more longer term strategic manner. The other thing, as you say, increased heart rate, and again, one of the things that we see with an increased heart rate is that decision making, the ability to make clear decisions, falls. So as you say, some mindfulness and some mindful breathing might help there. An interesting question here, I'd be interested in your take on it, from Georgia Williams. Sometimes when we're not absolutely focused, with a more wandering mind, we get insights and ideas that pop up as if from nowhere. Does very focused mindfulness potentially block out these insights?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant question. And so I think, again, although mindfulness is very simple in practical terms, there's so much to it, because mindfulness is also about, sometimes when we're trying to problem solve, we want to stare directly at the problem and go, answer, reveal yourself to me. Of course, it doesn't work. But the brain is amazing, and the brain is kind of listening to what you're saying, which is why taking a break or sleeping on something is really good for problem solving, because your brain continues to work on it in the background. So if you were using mindfulness to sort of bear down on it, then it could be quite unhelpful. And that's why, although mindfulness is relatively straightforward, you still want to practice it. And you can use mindfulness as a positive or a negative tool, let's be honest. So you have to develop that practice so that you can use it in helpful ways. But mindfulness can also allow you to let go of, if you're being sort of quite obsessive about thinking about something and overthinking. Mindfulness is brilliant for allowing you to kind of get that clarity, and then, and let your brain do what it does well, which is sort of naturally problem solve in the background.
Yeah, so I mean, we have about 70,000 thoughts a day, the vast majority of which we're not aware of at all. So that's still going to continue in your subconscious. Whereas this mindfulness seems to be very much about kind of focusing, if you want, your conscious mind on where you want it to be at that stage. Your subconscious will continue to do the wonderful things that it does.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I've got a question here that I'm quite interested in as a performance coach myself. So if we achieve the state of flow,
Mm-hmm.
is that an indication that we are achieving mindfulness?
Great question. I love that question. Yes, I think it is. So flow, I would define flow as an optimally challenging, absorbing and enjoyable activity. So not too easy, not too hard. You're in your sweet spot, the Yerkes-Dodson curve or whatever it is, you're in stretch. But it's also enjoyable. You like doing it. And it requires all of your attention, because it's optimally challenging most of the time. And we don't mind that it requires all our attention because we enjoy it. And they actually measured this thing called heart rate variability in performance athletes, concert pianists, and pilots as well, because apparently we're the same as athletes. And what they found was that these people had naturally higher levels of heart rate variability. And what that means, what that translates into, is a greater ability to get out of your stress response and back into your rest and digest. So you're able to withstand stressful situations and recover from stressful situations more quickly, but also you get less stress. Your amygdala is actually kind of less jumpy. So you feel less stressed and you recover more quickly because you've got this higher heart rate variability. And what they found was that people who did lots of flow activities had higher HRV. So they were being mindful whilst doing something they loved, and the result was they were actually able to deal with stress better, which I think also explains why people might say, oh, as a pilot, you must have to be like really cool under pressure. Well, yeah, we all like to think that, but also partly perhaps because we enjoyed our jobs and we were doing flow activities every day, that was actually helping us to be able to be more resilient to stress.
Yeah, flow, really interesting concept. I will not try to pronounce the name of the person responsible. Lots of good books out there to read. Quite interesting. Obviously, we've just had the Olympics and climbing in it for the first time, because that is an activity that is often brought out as flow. If you're going to climb and you're going to be safe, and particularly if you're going to be a free climber, then you need to be 100% focused on what you're doing while also being fluid and open to the experience. So some examples of it there.
Yeah, and I think also, sorry, I've got a couple of phrases that I sort of hang my hat on. The first one is like fly your aircraft, thanks to Peeps, who was unwittingly teaching me mindfulness. But, if you want, you can take that as, what is mindfulness? It's about having your attention where you want it to be. For me, it was flying the aircraft, not fantasizing about, funerals. So that's number one, is have your attention where you want it to be. But also there's another military phrase which I've adapted, which is train hard, fight easy. But actually, when you do flow activities, you can change that for play hard, fight easy. What I mean by that is, if you want your mind to behave as you want it to, if you want to have your attention where it needs to be under pressure, you need to train your mind when things are calm. You can't just wait for everything to go on and then go, be calm now, kind of thing. So you have to commit to training your mind. That's why people meditate, because that is dedicated mindfulness training. You commit to training every day, but you don't need that training to be boring or unpleasant. If there is something that you enjoy doing, which allows you to practice mindfulness, do that, and do it as often as you can. You can make mindfulness work for you. If you enjoy free climbing, then do it, because it will have a benefit for you. So you can play hard, fight easy. And that just means practice mindfulness in ways that work for you.
Yeah, and in these, the 1 minute exercises that you've talked about, the mental sit-ups, and if you can't find time for that in your day, then something is going quite horribly wrong. But as you say, it doesn't have to be hard work.
And also, I mean, I did it with my eyes closed because I'm used to meditating with my eyes closed. You could do that, I wouldn't recommend closing your eyes while you're driving a car, for example, but you could do that while you sat at the traffic lights waiting for the lights to go green. It doesn't have to take any extra time. You could do that sat anywhere else, and I won't get too base here, but there's lots of you are literally breathing in and out all the time, so you have got unlimited opportunities to practice mindfulness at any time of the day, apart from when you're asleep, clearly.
So we got a question here from Karen. Can mindfulness help at work when time management is a problem?
Can it help when time management is a problem? Yes. Again, it comes down to committing to it. But if you're finding time management difficult, there's a couple of things that might be going on. The first thing is, we might not be prioritizing in a way that's very helpful. And what we often do when we've got lots of things to do is we try and do lots of them at the same time. Hopefully I've convinced you not to do that. So one of the easiest ways to manage time better is to focus on one thing at a time and decide what your mission critical task is. So that kind of comes down to learning how to prioritize and having the confidence to prioritize. A lot of us have this fear that if we don't do everything, that we'll be less efficient. But it's just about kind of having the faith and going, I will actually be more effective if I focus on 2 things a day and not 10. The other interesting thing about multitasking is that in routine multitaskers, they have found that their ability to prioritize is reduced. So not only are you multitasking, but you're probably multitasking the wrong things because your brain, for some reason, they've studied it. So once you start to unitask, you will start to be better at prioritizing because you're starting to get that clarity. It's only by being able to step back and having that sort of clear mind, you can go, that's my mission critical task, and that is what I will focus on. I also think, again, I'm sure lots of you know this, but there's that, I think it's the, is it Parkinson's law? I can't remember what it is, but the 20-80 kind of rule where you get 80% of the benefit.
Yeah.
Is it right? Okay. 80% of the benefit from 20% of what you do. So I practice this, be ruthless and go, what is the 20%? What do I need to focus on? Because the reality is the other 80% can go, if it really needs to, it can go today, and I can just focus on that 20%.
Yeah, so, thinking of it from a leadership and management point of view, Child Management Institute, as a manager, then, if I give my team more focused tasks, that involve less multitasking, because I'm not asking them to do 10 things, I'm asking them to do 1 or 2. Am I being more mindful in my approach to them?
Certainly it's helping, by giving people less to do, but to do it well, the sort of quality, not quantity. I would also say, because we're talking about management and leadership, a really important part of mindfulness is about self-ownership. So if we micromanage people, and we all know micromanagers, don't we? If we micromanage and say, okay, I want you to unitask, but I want you to unitask on these 3 tasks, you're not necessarily allowing people to think for themselves. And mindfulness is about owning your choices, because ultimately nobody's in your head and nobody can tell you where to focus your attention. And if they try, because the brain is lazy, they go, okay, fine, but it stops thinking for itself. So again, think of mindfulness as kind of the opposite of what the brain wants to do. It just wants to be lazy. But once you start engaging it and thinking for yourself and going, right, what do I want to focus my attention on? So that's got to come from you. But as a manager, you can certainly create the space to say, okay, I don't necessarily expect you to do 10 tasks. I'm going to unitask, and I'm going to set the conditions for you to unitask. But ideally, you're not going to tell them what to unitask.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Interesting discussion so far. We got a question from Karen. How can mindfulness help when people are anxious about coming back to the office after a year of working from home after COVID?
Yeah. Okay. So another great question. So going back to the practical way to practice mindfulness is this focus and awareness. What that gives you are 2 things that I think are really important. The first one, which is often overlooked, is what I call distress tolerance. So we have this kind of obsession with, oh, people are sad, or people are stressed, or people are anxious, and this is bad. People must not feel like this, because we don't want people to suffer, clearly. However, being anxious is a kind of a natural thing, and being stressed, it's kind of quite natural. And with mindfulness, you can just acknowledge it and go, I'm feeling a bit stressed right now, but you know what? It's not going to kill me. So you can start to sit with uncomfortable emotions. And that's when, to do that, that's more of a advanced mindfulness technique. So I would advise that you put the time in. If you were doing an 8-week mindfulness program, sitting with difficulty would be week 6 or 7. But ultimately, we start to learn that these feelings of anxiety in themselves can't kill us. And actually, you can just sit with it. And once you realize that, they lose their power over you to a certain extent. You just go, okay, well, I'm anxious. Well, that's fair enough, but I don't have to give in to it, if you like. So that's distress tolerance. And then the other side of it is it gives you back your choices. Remember what I said, nobody can tell you where to focus your attention. Nobody can tell you what to think. They might try, but they can't. So ultimately, you get to decide where to focus your attention every minute of every day. And you can focus your attention on something which serves you and allows you to feel strong and positive. So I think that it is massively helpful. And I deliver workshops on this because I think that there is a tendency now to over-identify with things like anxiety, understandably, but actually part of it's about letting it go and going, it's not great, but it's also not the end of the world. And we're stronger than we think.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm guessing from what you're saying as well that companies, organisations can start this process before people are back in the office.
Absolutely, yeah. Be proactive about it. I think that's the other thing, is mindfulness is a proactive wellness tool, you know, whereas maybe something like therapy could be seen as being quite reactive, and some people might disagree because some people have therapists throughout their lives, but this is something that you can proactively train your brain for. As I said, you know, train hard, fight easy, or play hard, fight easy. So train your brain when things are calm, don't wait for crisis, so that when you get to crisis, you already have everything you need to be able to, you know, to cope with it.
So, interesting question here from Kyoko from Masinga. If I can practice mindfulness while walking, then can I while cruising down the motorway too?
Well, yes, you can. I mean, again, mindfulness is choosing where to focus your attention. So it depends where you want to focus your attention, but you could choose when you're driving your car to focus your attention on the car in front, I suppose. Probably quite a good place to practice it. You know, a lot of the time when we're driving, we get, you know, distracted by thoughts, and that's fine. But it really is just about focusing your attention where you want it to be. But obviously, there's a responsibility there to make sure you focus it on something which is safe and helpful for you. I wouldn't recommend that you start closing your eyes and chanting when you're driving your car. And an example of mindful walking, that's a great example. When you go for a walk, you know, whatever it is that you normally have your attention on, that's fine, but you can choose to, maybe for the first minutes of the walk or first 2 minutes or whatever, just focus on the contact of your feet on the ground. You know, if you're walking along gravel, you know, hear the scrunch, and just practice focusing your attention on, what do I hear, or what is the contact like, what, you know, can I feel the wind in my hair? It's just about deciding where to focus your attention, and you can do that literally anywhere, anytime. But of course, make sure that you're choosing to focus your attention somewhere helpful.
Yes, please, no eye shut driving down the motorway using the force. Yeah, as you say, it can be amazing what you can actually see and what appears to be new when you choose to pay attention to it. So last question for tonight from Joy31608. Is mindfulness different from concentrating?
Oh, good question. Yes, concentrating is a skill set within mindfulness, I would say, because mindfulness is also about being aware of where your concentration is, if you like. So it is the same, but it's more than that. I don't know who. Someone sounded like they had a child in the background, but anyway, did that answer your question?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So just before we bring things to a close, Sarah, what would you like people to take away from tonight?
What would I like people to take away from tonight? Well, I think that mindfulness is basically a fabulous tool that can help you to increase your performance, but also I think you can find a way to be mindful that works for you. It doesn't just involve meditating. So I would love everyone to walk away from this going, actually, mindfulness is going to help me, and I'm going to commit. I'm going to commit to training my brain, because that's what mindfulness is, so that it will benefit me in whatever way I want it to benefit me. But make the commitment, because it does take time, and it is something that you need to train your brain to do, because your brain is naturally lazy. So stick at it and it will happen.
Fantastic. So I'd like to say, Sarah, on behalf of the CMI and the South East Board, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who joined us. So tonight we've been talking with Sarah Finesse, RAF combat helicopter pilot, human factors facilitator, military airworthiness expert, and now mindfulness guru, and owner of Well Be It which provides mindfulness training to individuals in the corporate sector, and also provides winefulness tasting. I'll leave that up to you to look up. So Sarah, thank you very much.
Thank you. And if you want any more information, feel free to reach out to me. My website is wellbeingcoach.com, and I've got loads of resources on there, free meditation, things like that you can access for free. So there's plenty you can do to start on your mindfulness journey. Sorry.
Fantastic. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much, Sarah. So that is it for today's session. Thank you to everyone who joined us, and thank you, Steve, for hosting, and Sarah for your insights and expertise around mindfulness. If you're a member of CMI, you can log into Management Direct using the link in the live chat, where you can find a wide range of exclusive and practical development resources and much more. If you're not yet a member or subscriber, you can join our community via the link as well in the live chat, where you can gain full access to the Management Direct portal. You can also sign up to the free CMI newsletter for the latest trends and tips for managers and leaders. Please also do take a few minutes to let us know your thoughts on this evening's event by completing our evaluation form. The link is also in the live chat. So thank you again for everyone who joined us, and thank you, Steve and Sarah. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. Have a lovely evening.